Hey folks, welcome back to another artistic interview. Today we are joined by the illustrious Valsalia. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for joining us. Yeah, it's gonna be a pretty casual interview, just chatting about the stuff you've done, uh, your artistic journey, any stories or struggles you've had along the way.
Oh yeah, lots of all of them.
Yeah, I think it is good to see that humanized element of people we follow. Just because, it's easy to see a finished product and, assume that this is they came out of the womb being an amazing artist. But,
Oh, totally, yeah.
oftentimes it's not the case. We kind of have to go through a journey of learning and practice that people don't see in the background.
Seriously, seriously, I didn't even trying to learn to draw seriously until actually my mid-30s. I
Wow.
had that exact train of thought. I was like, oh man, you had to be either born some kind of genius or be, doing daily practice sessions after school since you were in elementary school. But no, it's one of the reasons I am just so quick to tell anybody that's at all interested. All you got to do is just practice, just a whole lot of practice. Same way human brain learns anything. So yeah, it's especially as somebody who started so late and realized I just spent so much time under that, the lie of I'm bad at drawing now. There's no way that I could get good at that. So yeah, I want to try and dispel that for anyone who is at all interested in learning to draw.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know many folks who kind of started late in life or I shouldn't say late in life, but later than most folks do, and kind of made a whole career out of it. So, I'm super curious, what kind of inspired you to start? Like, what were your beginnings like?
Well, I have always wanted to make comics. That's one of the things that, it's just been a standby for me just ever since when I was like 6, I think. I found a Calvin and Hobbes book. And, yeah, just started, you'll mostly like newspaper comics. I was really big into those for a long time. And for Read Out of Placers, you'll notice a lot of the storytelling type, the beats and everything are very much like comic strips rather than like comic books where each page, just is meant to be read as like a single sort of, chapters by chapters, whereas mine, they have a beginning, some stuff going on, and then a little bit of a wrap-up in the last panel or two. But, yeah, stories can absolutely be told that way, and it's just like the way my brain works in terms of pacing, dialogue, comedy, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it was definitely the early days that inspired not only the way I kind of think about putting these things together, but, just that want to make comics pretty much all my life.
Yeah, totally. I think it's cool too because, each panel or each strip almost has a punchline. So even if you're reading it as kind of a serialized, full story, you're still getting something out of every update, which is something you do with, I gotta say, remarkable frequency or consistency.
Yeah, honestly, that is one major upside of the strip format, I guess I'll call it, is that when you're caught up to a comic and are waiting for, each page to come out, print comics make that a lot easier because the whole chapter is presented to you in one, single piece all at once. But it can make following web comics a bit more, feels like not every page there might not necessarily be a payoff, like you're kind of building up to something. So I like to make every page have like a little something that, the reader can be satisfied with, so that it doesn't just feel like each page is on its way to getting somewhere, but, offer something on its own, sort of.
Yeah, I really love that mention of payoff because I think we were chatting a bit before, and you gave the impression that you think of yourself as more of a writer, in kind of speciality. So what is your approach to telling a very long form story? How do you kind of outline things or plan things out, or how did you even decide to start working on something of this scope and and commitment.
Yeah. So I will say part of why I actually have a double major in print journalism right before the internet started to kill it,
Ooh.
but also creative writing because I thought, okay, I can't draw, but I could tell stories by writing because I was always good at that. English were my easy classes,
Hmm.
and that has really helped out because if I went straight into comic making, then I would have had much less of a background and experience in just writing, storytelling, that part of it.
Hmm.
And I still feel like even after all this time, I have more overall experience and skill in writing than my art. Like I'm very happy with my art, but I just feel like, especially in the first dozen pages or so, when I was really rusty, I knew, okay, if anything, it's going to be the writing that gets people through this kind of rocky start. You said something else. Oh man, yeah. What was the question again? There was a second part of it that I had a lot to say about.
Oh, I think writing a story of like that kind of scope and, you know, I
Ah, yeah,
guess,
yeah.
commitment, because, it's easy to plan out like a short story that has a beginning, middle, end, the whole thing is resolved in, one afternoon, versus something that, might take years and years to finish, which I think a lot of folks kind of aspire to make that kind of, narrative writing of, something they can work on, for a long time.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's also, it can feel like this insurmountable Everest of, well, I need to make sure everything's planned out in advance before I even begin to work on
Oh,
things,
yeah.
which is something I hear a lot, actually.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that is really something that actually, I'd say out of places, I think my fourth act, like solid attempt at
Oh,
comics.
really?
And the first three were, they majorly burned out because of that exact phenomenon. And and this is something I noticed. I think it might just be something that's incredibly common in our generation and everybody younger or
Mm.
maybe older. We just didn't know about it because they didn't have the internet to express themselves. But especially now, so many people I talk to have this like a story that they've been working on since they were like 10 or something, just kept it in their mind, and it's like just on and off been building on it, just jamming more ideas into it.
Mm.
And I had a couple of those myself. And it is so easy to make something bigger in your mind than is ever possible of actually tackling it. Like it becomes this, you know, your magnum opus, the thing that
Hmm.
the story you have to tell before, before you finally pass away is like what you're going to leave behind. And because it becomes this enormous, long, personally important project in your mind, there's never the right time to start it because everything has to be perfect first. And also, you're holding off on actually doing it so you don't have the experience necessary to actually start.
Mm.
So, yeah, I had, of all these other comics, I had just like dozens, one of them hundreds of pages of exact scripts, descriptions, a direction, character info, setting info, and everything. And yeah, it just became too much for me to ever actually touch because it was this super important, perfect work that I'm just not ready right now.
Right.
And because of that, I never will be. But Out of Placers actually came together over the course of, I want to say, just 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, well, I did have just like a decade long grab bag of ideas, characters, setting ideas, and things like that. So when it just came to a moment where I'm like throwing my hands up, okay, I just want to draw a comic. I just want to do a comic. Just stop overthinking it. Just get some ideas out of that grab bag, massage them together into a coherent plot, and just start it. And so, yeah, anybody that wants to do a project, or even if you do want to stick to your, you know, big, long, huge, self important magnum opus, probably don't want to start with that. Like George R. R. Martin did a lot of books before he started Game of Thrones, because if he had just started that was his first project, they would have kind of sucked. So much of why they're good is because he came up with so many ideas and had so much experience writing and feedback and everything
Mm.
that by the time he was ready to start that, he was really ready. So, like, one suggestion I have is, if you're married to the idea of this, you know, big important story that you want to tell, start off small. Like, come up with a short story from that setting, or using those characters either from the story itself, or like make up a little side story, just something to get your hands dirty with it, get that sort of experience, figure out, oh, okay, I thought I was going to do panels like this, but this is really bad, so I want to do it like this instead. But the point is, start, do something, whatever it is. You'll never get closer as long as it remains in the concept pre-production stage. And really, just that hesitance to touch it has prevented so many good stories in people's heads from ever getting told.
Mm.
And so I really, and anytime somebody says they have something like that, I really try and coax them past that whole, my first work will be the one that I wanted to tell forever. Yeah, it just doesn't work in that order as much as we absolutely want it to be.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. There's a great saying that I came up with just now, which is that procrastination is shit. Is that perfectionism is
Oh, it
the
is.
mother of procrastination, which, is something I have seen in a lot of folks. And yeah, like that, there is that element of, you can like work on a bunch of kind of half formed ideas that don't need to be perfect, because, I mean, the first few books like any author will make aren't going to be very good. You kind of have to get through that initial hurdle of being pretty mediocre or even being disappointed in your work, but at least finish the thing. And then you can always cannibalize the ideas later on, you
Oh,
know.
very much so. And yeah, it's so I've also seen so many, obviously, like, where first few pages are just building the foundation for something enormous. And but despite that, it's what was I just going to say? Yeah, they, because they don't have the experience and skill to tell that story on the level they want it to, whether it's the uh, the direction, the art, or whatever, that when they see the difference between what they're able to create at that moment and what this magnificent, beautiful thing is in their heads, it hurts. And I mean,
Mm.
that absolutely has killed so many of these ideas early on, because it's, this thing that's so important to them, their own expectations of it are so high. And every with every page it's falling short of that, then they feel like, oh man, I'll never be able to do this justice, maybe I'll just wait even longer.
Mm.
Oh yeah, and one other thing you said about pacing, right? Getting this plot, this really long story told over a long amount of time. Uh, yeah, those other earlier ideas I had, everything was set in stone. Like, every bit of dialogue, every bit of direction, character moves over here, looks this way, all this sort of stuff. Ideas do change over time. So, one of the things I did with Out of Placers is, rather than make everything in advance, I decided to figure out, okay, what are the main plot points, like the main story beats, the main character arc moments. And before trying to figure out what comes between those, I kind of like to set those, kind of like, I think a good visual of it is along hiking paths and mountain climbing, that kind of thing.
Mm.
There's there'll be like marked points, kind of like flags. Uh, there's a lot of different ways you can go to get between those areas, but each one is like an important sort of like either like a scenic area, or just an important part to gather your supplies before you go forward. So those major story beats, like Cass will meet up with the Indril and get Yanet on board the cart. Cass accidentally breaks open that thing and gets turned into a yinglet. Things like that. That got set early on. And so because of that, I know exactly how this thing is going to end, and all the major story beats that are coming, between now and then. But leaving the in between as a general idea that I'm always thinking about, but leaving myself open to alterations has been just the absolute best way to do it. It means the main story remains the same, but I've been at this for like almost 10 years now,
Mm.
so I've had
Oh
so
wow.
many ideas of like, oh yeah, this would go so much better than this old idea I have. So if I had set this in stone, I wouldn't have had that wiggle room to make these sort of improvements over time. I think a good example of this is Lopin originally wasn't a major character.
Oh.
He just, yeah, he was going to be a minor side character, but he's the one that kind of got the story going, but wasn't going to be in with this, with the main group. But then I realized, okay, this is actually he fills a very specific and important role in this, in that he's the only like natural, like non-human or non or former human or non-patriarch or matriarch. Like he's the only one in the main cast that represents like what a normal Yinglet is.
Mm.
That and just it was just fun to write him, and I realized just in the comments how much people like this character. And but because I gave myself enough wiggle room with this, I realized, okay, I'll throw him in with the main cast. It's just he allows for a whole lot of things to happen in the interaction of the story that the story wouldn't have otherwise. So, and uh, this is a pretty good method. Just focus on those major beats of this happens, then later this happens, just the important stuff. Get that out on paper, but don't constrain yourself too much, especially with this kind of long form format when anything can happen over those years.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really interesting approach. Because there is that over planning can really muck up someone's ability to actually, make the thing they have in mind. But also, like how your mindset of the story can change over time. I think in the Discworld series, the Guards books, uh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Carrot, or the character of Carrot was meant to be like the main POV character, and then it turned out there was a different one that was like way more fitting as
Yeah, yeah.
the kind of audience stand-in. Uh, and that's a pretty big change to make. But if you're kind of like willing and able to make alterations midway through, it's almost like improv performing. Like you have those touchstones of things that you definitely want to cover, but you're also not afraid to, in a way, kill your babies if you have to.
Oh, absolutely. And you read the very first book written in the Discworld series. It's so different than everything else that came
Yeah.
after. It was like almost. I think it was just meant to be a one-off. But yeah, if Pratchett hadn't had that willingness to just change up things as he went along, then we might not have even had Discworld. And but yeah, Pratchett is right along with Bill Watterson in his
Mm.
just presentation comic beast style. Pratchett is probably my biggest influence in terms of storytelling, just the mood of things.
Mm.
In that, especially in that, you can have a book that is mostly kind of lighthearted, jovial, and doesn't take itself too seriously, and yet it can convey and just deep sort of philosophical musings, as well as have some really dramatic or important sort of stuff to happen. But those don't have to be seriousness versus frivolousness. That they don't have to be unique to each other. And so yeah, there are some very sort of deep and important things I want to say with Out of Placers, but yeah, my mind has always just been in kind of slice of life and light comedy, interpersonal relationships, that kind of thing. So yeah, there are bigger, more important things I want to say with the comic, but I really want most of it to always remain on the lighter side, sort of.
I knew there was something I liked about your writing style. Like I couldn't quite place it. No, yeah, that's a really cool. Because I was actually going to ask about your inspirations, um, but I can totally see like the Calvin and Hobbes, Discworld, uh, vibes in that, in a way, like having a somewhat lighthearted comedic tone, but also being willing to, do those like gut punch moments makes him like hit even harder, because I think everything kind of thrives in contrast. Everything shows more. Uh, so yeah,
Good
that
point.
is really cool to hear. For self indulgent reasons, do you have any particular favorite Discworld books out of the series?
Man, I gotta say, I actually got into it, I think, later than a lot of people.
Hmm.
And now that Pratchett is gone, I've actually really slowed down my reading the books because I know they are a finite resource now.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to keep reading Discworld until they stick me in the grave. So I'm rationing myself to like one book every 2 or 3 years or so.
Hmm.
But still, so far, it's got to be the Guard storyline.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a good choice. I feel the same way. I'm about 30 books in, but those last few books they are hard to read. You can really tell the embuggerance was starting to affect the writing, and he kind of handed it off to other folks to help him out, and it doesn't feel the
Yeah.
same. But yeah, uh, would you say those were your main inspirations as far as writing goes, and how you approach a story? Uh, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned slice of life because in reality, like the comic doesn't move very fast, does it? You mentioned you've been working on it for 10 years, but I think only a pretty short amount of time has passed.
Yeah, there's some web comics that have been going for like 20 years, and I think like 2 months have passed. It can really, there are going to be some time skips when there are periods in the story where there isn't a whole lot going on, nothing huge, but yeah. Well, also, I didn't really start putting out pages on a regular and basis and at the pace that I am until I want to say about like 5 years ago.
Oh, really?
The first just like year to 1 to 3, I think I only like there were entire months where I didn't put out a single page. At that point, I was still doing the sketches in an actual physical sketchbook, and then uh, scanning them, then doing the lines in Photoshop, which is a terrible program to do lines in. And so yeah, it was very much a hobby at that point, very light. So really over half of all the pages put out have been probably put out in the last 5 or 6 years, I want to say.
Mm.
Got a really slow start. And a part of that was because I was actually, when I started it out, coming off of a period of drawing almost not at all for like a straight 2 years or so.
Hmm.
I was just really focusing on other things, and yeah, I went to try and draw again. And holy crap, how did I do all this stuff? My figures look terrible. My anatomy's off. And so I would say at the time, a good half of the reason that I started out of Placers is I just wanted to give myself a project to keep myself drawing regularly so I didn't get rusty again. So yeah, it was mainly just yeah, a very unserious. I mean, I definitely took it serious in when I was making the comic, but not serious as like a commitment. I would say there weren't a whole huge amount of people reading it, so nobody would complain if I didn't put out a page for a month or two. But yeah, when it picked up, it really picked up.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think you do have a level of consistency that I don't frequently see with webcomics because a lot of folks will just go on hiatus and then that is the last you ever hear of them, which is fair enough.
Yeah,
But also it's always very saddening because you get like really invested in a story and like what's gonna happen to these characters. I gotta find out.
exactly.
And then it's radio silence. How do you maintain that level of consistency and like pushing out? I think it's like 4 pages every month.
Yeah, part of it, and this is going to be different for everybody, but it's also really important that everybody understands their own, well, themselves, what their motivations are, what gets them going, what keeps them on something. And so for me, the first three comic ideas I had were they were important to me. They had things that I wanted to say, but I also m- made it to be something that would be like, I want to say made for mass appeal
Mm.
rather than like something that I personally was super excited about. Like, yeah, the story is important and everything, but if I want to make sure as many people read this as possible. So I like this, but that might weird some people out. So I'll just throw that away. And yeah, it's hard to keep it going. So the original couple of drafts of Out of Placers didn't have any transformation at all in it.
Hmm.
It's a narrative element that I've just always loved, and it's been with humanity since pretty much the beginning of storytelling.
Mm.
In that it opens up situations that it just allows for a lot of really good storytelling potential. And so yeah, I was actually really nervous that when Cass got changed to a Yinglet, that would weird people out and like lose readers. And turns out that's when they all started reading. So not only was that a good idea in that sense, but that's one of those elements that well, when deciding what this comic would be, I realized, okay, this is something I'm really interested in, something I have a lot to say about, something I've thought about a lot. So I think I have some interesting ideas or angles on it. So I'm going to put it in there so that the comic is interesting for me to make, because it is it's essentially a marathon. And you got to keep yourself, or you got to give yourself a story that you'll be interested in coming back day after day, week after week, and continuing to tell. So I realized that might be a pretty important element if I want this thing to keep going. And that's a big part of it. But the other one is that, again, I know what motivates me, how to keep myself going. So as soon as I went full time with the comic, I I did have a Patreon open for, let's say, year, maybe two before I went full time with it. But there's two models. You can pay a flat monthly rate with Patreon, and I knew if I took that, there's a good chance I'm gonna get lazy and like
Mm.
fall behind, and but also not really feel like I need to get caught up to a regular sort of self-set schedule, because there's really no outside pressure. I mean, there's like people stop reading, but that's a very kind of vague, far off sort of thing that doesn't happen quickly. Uh, so I chose the other one, which is pay per post. Also, because if there was a month where I couldn't put out as many pages as I'd like to, I didn't want to charge people the full amount for it.
Yeah.
So that also has the very motivating upside of, if I don't put out a minimum of 4 pages per month, then I start getting really behind on food and rent and stuff. So
Mm.
even on days that I'm not, really feeling like up to a drawing mood, but I look at the calendar, oh, no, I only have so many work days until the end of the month. Well, I'm motivated now. Let's just get to it. Who cares? And then once I've been drawing for an hour or so, I'm always into it anyway. But I knew giving myself a sort of cutoff and only charging for stuff that I actually post has been a big part in keeping myself going.
Yeah, that's a lot of great information. I think also something I used to recommend to folks. I don't know if I necessarily recommend it anymore, but is oh, I can never motivate myself to draw. Well, try doing commissions. Try having that pressure of
Oh
someone
yeah.
eagerly awaiting the thing that they've paid you to do. I think it's quite a motivating thing. And yeah, that's another great point is, like making something that you would want to read or something that appeals to you is super important when you're kind of like designing a story, like you can get like that Marvel movie slop, mass appeal, it's like a perfect comfortable 7 out of 10 that everyone will kind of like, versus that cult
Hmm.
following of people who are like obsessive over something because it just like scratches like the one itch that they've been waiting for and they didn't even know it.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that really was. I mean, a big part of the motivation on my part, that I wanted to tell the kind of story that I myself want to see more of.
hmm.
And I got, yeah, the success of Out of Placers is definitely tied to the fact that it scratches a niche that is largely unfilled.
Hmm.
I'm perfectly aware of that. It's the whole long form post transformation daily life sort of stuff. Like there's a lot of stories that'll deal with, oh, like the initial shock of transformation. Oh, what am I going to do about this? Getting used to the new muscles and bones and senses and thoughts and all these sorts of things. And I mean, I don't blame him, because it's the follow up that, that takes like 100 times longer to tell than a story about just the initial transformation itself.
Hmm.
But I'm really interested in that sort of stuff, just the little daily realizations of, oh, I didn't know I could move my tongue in this sort of manner, or little things like that, or just the adjustment over time, both physically and psychologically, to
Hmm.
being something completely different. And yeah, there are very few. There's more books, because books can be written a lot faster than comics can tell a story. But also, I think the visual element of comics and in storytelling has always been important to me. So I know I could, like, if I was writing out of placers, I want to say I could get to where we are in the story right now in one, maybe two books, and probably would have been done, like, I want to say, like, 6 years ago. But that's just part of the format, and part of the reason I try to make it visually interesting. Make use of the comic format, as opposed to just having it being dialogue with headshots, or that kind of thing. But yeah, just overall, uh, I myself want to see more of this kind of story. So be the change in the world you want to see, and all that, right?
Yeah, it's also really cool. You mentioned like writing a book, but also like there are elements of the story that kind of are like a book. I think there's like the field guides and the journals, which are basically just a giant wall of text. Those are actually some
Oh
of my
yeah,
favorite parts of the comic. I
I'm really glad. That's actually, because I still think of myself as a writer at heart, and really there's so much that you can tell in in narrative format, uh, that often you can't really do directly in comics.
mm,
uh, like, for example, like I could have written three entire chapters about just physical descriptions of difference in, like, nerves, the uh, senses, the way different muscle groups feel and everything right after Cass's transformation, for example.
mhm.
And so I knew, okay, I would need to have some outlet for those really detailed write-ups that, in typical comic format, you can only usually get that kind of exposition or narration by having a character strike up a conversation about this or that. But and it's something we allow in comics, because it's just really hard to get that sort of content otherwise. But a lot of the times it does feel kind of forced in. Like, why would somebody talk in detail about
Mm.
something, some part of their world that
Like they both already know.
that is, yeah, it'd be like taking a couple chapters to have a person describe, this is really what a car is when you think about it.
Yeah, no one would
So
ever think
yeah,
about that. No one would ever say that aloud, cause, unless they're stoned or something.
yeah, and it's, every form of media has its own, uh, you know, things where we give it a little, a little bit of leeway, because we know it's a limit of the format. Like stage play, especially, there are just some plays that you cannot tell without at least having a little break where everybody's off stage, and while they're setting up the scene, the narrator will say, this happened, and then while this is happening, these characters talk about so and so, set the new
Mm.
scene. And every form of media does have some concessions that we give in order to and just enjoy them. So yeah, that's definitely mine for comics, having those pages that are just very much straight up written. And just as an aside, because I myself have a habit of oftentimes skipping through lore dump pages on comics, then coming back to them later once I've gotten caught up,
Mm.
I would be kind of a hypocrite if I, you know, expected other people to not do the same for mine. So every every journal or field guide, everything that's in more written format rather than drawn is essentially supplementary. Like you can skip it and not lose anything in the story. There's anything that's going to be important for you to know in reading the story, you'll get by reading the story. You'll definitely get a little more out of it or be able to make connections like, oh, I bet that's actually part of that. If you're, if you read the field guides and journals as they appear in the comic, but also, you don't have to if you feel like just going to the next page and then reading these giant text dumps later. So I'm glad that I've been able to consistently do that. And I really hope that I can, continue making it, good for the story, but not necessary, at least the first time around.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, I love the focus on like psychological elements and physiological elements, and there's like this overthinkingness to like the way you write, where you don't
Oh,
just kind of
definitely.
gloss over something. It's like, oh yeah, and these guys are a thing. It's like no, like what is actually the society of a bunch of strange little creatures, or like these completely inhuman, you know, sapient beings, like how would they communicate? Well, obviously they don't have vocal cords, so they have like this kind of uh entirely different system. I would love to hear more
Yeah, yeah.
about how you approach like designing like these creature races, because most fantasy, the Tolkien-esque dynamic of we got humans and we got short humans and we got humans with pointy ears, like none of the
Yeah.
like the fantasy races in your setting are just a human. They're all distinct in some way. How do you approach that?
Well, aside from things like transformation as a narrative element, there's also a few other things that I absolutely love in my personal life. Have just done a huge amount of study and reading and talking about, and so that I've developed, I think, some interesting things to say on it. Another one of those things is I love anthropology. Just
Mm.
the the way that human culture came to be and how much of it is due to our ancestral biology, like the way that influences the way we socialize, the way we've created our societies. And I've always loved sort of what if scenarios of, okay, what if humanity instead developed under these conditions? Or, and another one is like, what if something that isn't human at all was, born or, like became sapient and culturally able in similar situations to us? Like, how would their biology determine the differences in their society? And so a lot of that, what if, how would societies on both a individual socialization and larger cultural governmental level, uh, with completely inhuman characters, what would that look like? And that actually leads to another major thing I think about a lot is how other cultures and species would interact with humans if they're, very, very different, not just, blue humans or
Mm.
short humans,
Mass
as you were
Effect kind
saying.
of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I get that. No, it's a lot easier to mocap something than hand do animations for all the weirdos.
Yeah.
Which is why you don't see the hulking, uh, weird talking purple guys that much. They're just so much more trouble to animate and voice and all that. But
Mm.
anyway, so yeah, I've always wondered. Oh yeah, actually, let me step back a little. There's often, when you take these species that are highly different than humans, uh, most of the time they are either regulated to the enemy role, and you don't really learn too much about them. Like
Mm.
in in Lord of the Rings, we don't know a whole lot about like orc society outside from the usual,
Yeah.
yeah, they like raiding and worshiping their dark gods, and even though Tolkien did expand on that a bit in the his later writings, there's still, you know I understand it's definitely harder to uh, oh wait, no, or the aside from the enemy role, the other role that they're usually relegated to is just always remaining the unknown, because like their appeal is essentially being this mysterious thing that humans can barely understand. So I haven't read a whole lot of stories, which is again another reason I'd like to include this element in my own,
Hmm.
where incredibly different, very inhuman species aren't this either enemy or total unknown. They're just like, oh yeah, a couple of those live down the street. We say hi when we go to the bakery. I wanted to experiment with like actually, yeah, this is the third element I'll going into this, in that in stories where there's like highly different species, the focus of the species themselves in the story is almost always made conflict.
Hmm.
How does the conflict inevitably happen? What are the inequalities in society? And there's nothing wrong with that sort of story. I just feel like there's plenty of stories already out there doing that that would, probably tell that sort of story a lot better than I. But yeah, I wanted one where things could be just much more of a daily life, how interaction between individuals in societies that are completely different, but on a mostly friendly and civil sort of way.
Hmm.
Like, just without that whole, there has to be conflict, they must be either enemies or unknown. No, it's like, okay, take StarCraft or something. How about if the Zerg just were on totally mutual understanding roles with humans? How would
Hmm.
that society work out? Would they like be given like permission to make nests in like deserts or Arctic areas where humans couldn't really make a lot of use
Yeah,
of? Like,
spawn some
what would they
overlords,
contribute?
generate some renewable energy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, they'd probably be able to make some medicines. Like, what are the if they're not just like immediate kill on sight,
Hmm.
what kind of interactions would there be? What would their societal uh, conflicts on more individual scale? But just how would those all mesh together? But since very different usually means enemy or total unknowns, it's just something I don't see explored all that much. But I thought about so much that I realized, okay, not only is this one of those interesting things to me personally, but I also feel like there's a lot I have to say about it. So yeah, that's why I decided to include highly different species in this way that I did.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned StarCraft too, as well. Because I think, along with like Discworld, Terry Pratchett with like the trolls and the dwarves and the gnolls and all that, there's also like Warcraft as a setting, which I think was the first one to kind of say, hey, what if like the orcs were people and had a society and you could actually see things from their perspective?
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
which kind of has changed the fantasy landscape almost, because in D&D like first edition, you couldn't be an orc. You could maybe, I don't remember if you could be a half orc, but even then it's like half orcs only happen under very unfortunate circumstances. uh
yeah,
and then it's later on there's kind of that element of, well, what if orcs aren't like categorically or ontologically evil? They actually maybe have some kind of misguided society. Or, maybe humans were actually the aggressors, and there's some kind of like political thing going on here where, anti orc propaganda has been so, you
yeah.
know, pervasive that there's like no hope of peace unless something really changes. Yeah, I think it is really cool to like explore those dynamics of, like we've got all these crazy creatures in one big society. How do we keep it from falling apart?
Yeah, and obviously there is some tension between the species. Like, yinglets are really a very isolationist sort of species, and the fact that uh, the Valsalian enclave is so close to an actual human city is really weird for them. It's kind of like a test project. Like, if things go south, then they're more or less an outpost. So it's like, okay, no big loss. They're not going to influence the main Southlands tribes. But and same thing with the Baxid having this. They're not super isolationist, but they do feel uncomfortable about some things that they try and keep secret.
Mm.
So there is, some conflict between the species and their societies, but most of it is just them. Like the story is about how they would actually get along, because yeah, I mean, I think it can be harder to tackle because in conflict scenarios, it's a lot easier to tell how things would go. It's just a
Yeah.
lot simpler. But yeah, it takes a lot more thought to figure out, okay, how would they actually get along? Like if they're shopping in the same markets and stuff, what kind of uh, like would you make higher arches in your buildings, knowing that some of your customers are going to be like 10 feet tall at standing? Uh, there's just a lot more to consider. So I don't blame anybody for kind of glossing over or not focusing on that element, but it's just the heart of what the story I want to tell. So that's what it is.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of world building folks will really appreciate or do really appreciate that the overthinkingness that is perhaps required to, make like, oh, if this is true about the world, what else is true? If there's giant like worms
Yeah.
that live amongst the humans, well, how do they communicate? Oh, they don't have hands. How they need some helpers to, actually facilitate like fine motor control. Um and that's also a really cool thing is I think you actually think about like what would it be like to be this creature, which is kind of almost the core of the comic is like the experience on both a physical and psychological level of like being something inhuman.
Hmm.
uh, but it's also cool to explore like societally and narratively and all that.
Yeah. And the fact that, you would immediately be, even in the most utopian, uh, forward thinking and, understanding society, if you become something entirely different, you're going to be perceived differently. You're going to feel differently when you're, moving around, communicating. And yeah, I do have a habit of overthinking, especially into these kinds of details. So I have a lot of fun just really working out, okay, what would the experience of being this thing be? Like, do you have to kind of work yourself up to not be intimidated when looking up and talking to somebody who's like three times your height? And just things like that. I would say one of the things I'm decently good at is putting myself in the mindset of lots of sort of like hypotheticals, I would say. And again,
Mm.
if I were writing this in narrative format, there would be entire chapters just based on like psychological differences or physical differences, feelings. Just I could just blabber on about that indefinitely. So yeah, it's another reason I wanted to do journals in addition to field guides, because it's really the only format where I can have Cass just say straight up, okay, I want you to do a thought exercise about like, here's what having a snout is like. Your face is really this vertical plane, and yeah, you can forget about that. This like this, you feel the uh, rush of air traveling all the way up this foot long thing up between your eyes, as opposed to like entering in there. And so yeah, I just spent a lot of time thinking about these sorts of things and what would be interesting to convey. And thankfully, because the comic is a relatively slow moving format, uh, I've had years to think about all these sorts of little things. So
Mm.
if I was writing a book, I would need to be like really crunching out these kinds of thought experiments. But at this pace, I got weeks, months, years to come up with all these things to you know figure out what's the most interesting thing I could say or write about this or that. So yeah, I've had plenty of time to. Oh yeah, that's. I'll call back to another thing, and that this is another one of those reasons that not setting everything in stone has been a definitely a boon to the comic.
Mm.
Is that there's a lot of things in terms of like, yeah, those thought experiments that I just did not have when I initially created the species, that kind of thing. Uh, But since then, since I'm focusing specifically on this handful of species, this world, uh, it's given me plenty of time to really focus on this one specific cast of characters, types of species. Uh, so it's one of the upsides of having such a focus over such a long time on something so so focused. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I will say, if you ever did write a book, I would totally read it. I think your approach to writing is something that I don't see very often, and it's something I'd like to see more of. People like just like that overthinkingness of the world building. If this is true, what else is true? Kind of really like delving into like the mechanics of a setting. I'm sure there's plenty of that out there. I think
Yeah, if you do, definitely refer to me. I want as many of those stories in my head as I can get.
yeah, and that is the cool thing about making stories is that if something doesn't exist, you can be the one to make it, and if there's a niche and like a bunch of people have been waiting to see this one thing that only you make, you've got yourself something amazing, and I think that's
Oh yeah.
a lot of folks will be like, oh, I really want to write about this or this, but it's not popular right now, so I can't possibly do it. I was like, the fact that it isn't popular, you could be the one to popularize it.
Very much so. I mean, so much about you know companies that uh, just are like billionaires over the course of a couple of years. Every time, it's because they're filling something that there is a demand for that there is not currently a supply for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really funny. Like there's kind of this trend in the gaming industry where an indie game will take a huge risk on something that is very niche and might not pay off. I think like Supergiant, makes Hades, great
Oh
example.
yeah, yeah.
And now like all of the AAA companies want to make their own Hades and like have copied the art style, and it's like, well, the fact that you're doing it now means you're not really taking a risk, you're just following a trend. And following a trend, on one hand, it's not going to make something that you're genuinely proud of in wanting to see, because it's like this is the story you've always been waiting for. But
Hmm.
it's also it's not going to be interesting, and it's not going to be unique. And if you can make something unique, I think that's how you get that kind of cult, the room level following. I don't know
Oh yeah, definitely.
why that came to my head.
I mean, it's a good example. It's and yeah, the same thing with like Undertale, lots of indie games
Mm.
that it really is. Or let me go at this a different way. When you're like a AAA company, if Toby Fox didn't make this huge millions making blockbuster game, okay, no big deal. He made some money off of it. There's no problem with that. Okay, I'll just go back to whatever else I'm doing. If a AAA game, you know, just tanks incredibly, that's like hundreds of millions of dollars of lost. Hundreds of people get laid off.
Mm.
It's it's unfortunate, but it's the same thing with the movie industry. When there's a huge amount of money put into something, risk it has the possibility of making a whole lot of money, but it also has the ability to just completely make everything you built up crash down.
Mm.
So yeah, when you're dealing with those kinds of huge studios, lots of money, lots of people's jobs on the line, I understand why they're risk avoidant,
Mm.
but it also means that yeah, it is kind of up to the indie companies and. Yeah, Expedition 33, great example.
Oh,
People who've been working at
yes.
Ubisoft who are like, oh man, they won't let us do what we want. So yeah, they left, did their own thing, and look at that. Now we've got like an entire wave of games realizing, oh, people aren't avoiding turn-based games just because they're turn-based games. They're avoiding them because they didn't do anything new or interesting with the format and didn't have good stories to tell.
Mm.
So yeah, it is. I wish that other studios. Well, there are also some that are just proven to be imaginative enough that people are willing to take risks on them. I think like Hideo Kojima is
Yeah.
probably the biggest single name. It's like, okay, we have no idea what this guy's going to make, but we'll fund it.
Yeah, I think it's like the concept of an auteur is a like director of a movie or something, where they're kind of reputable for what they make, and the fact that they are unapologetically strange or weird is what gives them
Hmm.
such mass appeal. And we kind of see this with Undertale, like Toby Fox, he's kind of a weirdo. Like the stuff he makes, you would not expect anyone to like it until it actually was made, and turns out like this is what people have been waiting for their whole lives. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
so like, a AAA studio might have never taken a chance on him, but the fact that he could make his thing and prove that, this is what, like an unabashed kind of courageous thing that like, making your own baby, right? That you're proud of, and this is what you've always wanted to tell the story. Uh, it you're almost like proving to like all these investor people that, hey, listen, people actually like this, and that's also why you have to kind of just make the
Hmm.
damn thing. Uh,
Oh, very much so.
like it goes back to what we were saying earlier of like this reluctance to put stuff out there for fear of like what people might think, or like maybe it's going to be bad, or it's going to, people are going to think it's weird. Well, you kind of have to take that risk, because if you're willing to make the weird thing that might have no mass appeal, but there's going to be like a small group of extremely dedicated people who it's literally their favorite thing in the world, it's worth making.
Yeah, and going back to the whole make whatever type of media it is that you're making something that you yourself are interested in making and seeing. Like, I know I probably could, if I like made something a bit more mass appeal and still somehow managed to, keep at it this long, I could probably have like raked in a lot more followers and readers and money. But also the conversations, like reading the comments and replying to them, seeing what people think, would be a lot less interesting to me, because I really put so many of the things that are close to my heart, like transformation as a narrative element, anthropology, what ifs about like different species and uh, settings of creating societies, all the sort of stuff that I'm really interested in. Since I put that in this comic, now it's just so much more interesting to interact with the smaller number of people, but just have so much more interesting things to say about, I'm having the conversations about things that I'm really interested in because of that. And that's another, it really gets me motivated. Every single comment that I read is just putting something out there and like getting a little ping from somebody. How did it hit somebody? In what ways did they interpret this or that? It's yeah, everyone I read just lights this fire a little brighter.
That's the dopamine hit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, like, and I think it is really cool to like make something that just resonates with people, because it often can happen in unexpected ways, and I think art, this is my subjective opinion, but I think art is a little more about like how people interpret it, and through their own lens, than like the creator's intent almost.
Oh, totally.
I
That's one of the reasons I'm very hesitant to say, no, you're totally wrong about that. No, you shouldn't have perceived this scene that way. It's, yeah, I just, thoughts like that just don't occur to me. I, my reaction is just instead, oh, interesting. I could see how you'd see it that way. Or I'm also like, okay, if somebody draws the skeletal structure of a yinglet like in a way that's different than quote unquote canon, I'm not like, you did this wrong, you got to change it. I'm just like, oh no, that's they would have looked. That's how they would have looked if they had that kind of leg arrangement instead. That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool to see people's different interpretations of something. You know, I I think there is often that puritanism of oh, everything has to be perfect, but that's also the perfectionism that causes nothing to be done. Because if there's like
Yeah.
incredibly strict guidelines for everything, then no one's gonna actually be able to fulfill those kind of standards. You have to like accept the the good with the bad.
Yeah, and I understand the impulse for that need of or level of need of control. Uh, but also, it's not only constantly aggravating because if something is on the internet, it's no longer completely yours.
Mm.
It's partially. It's like I've seen some comic authors who are like, no, I don't want to see people drawing pictures of my characters and putting them on the internet. It's like it feels like you're, violating them or things like that. But I grew up very much in the early internet era where, like, if something's out there, it kind of belongs to everybody. It'll always be created by that person, but people are gonna, apply every possible fetish to every single character you could ever imagine. So you got to make your peace with that. And like, don't which is like, yeah, I see like, okay, here's a yinglet that is it's mostly a giant blob of fat, but hey, that's interesting for me to see. It's like, this is a skinny stick creature, so okay, that's where you'd put all the fat deposits. Interesting. It's not my thing, but somebody is enjoying the stuff that I'm putting my time and work in their own way, and I love seeing that. And it can also be kind of limiting. I know some people, when they make an original species, they think, or like, they'll make a big sheet. Okay, you cannot, you need to buy permission to
Mm.
make your own drawings of these, and I need to give my say so, vet your design, make sure it's, up to my own standards. But that's also very restraining in that I would say most of, the attention Out of Places have gotten has been through word of mouth and people making their own characters. And yeah, my response to that when somebody says, what are the guidelines on making a Yingling character? I'm like, oh, just do whatever, have fun. And all I ask is, link back to me so that or to the comics, so that, if somebody thinks, oh, what's this little Yinglet thing? Then they can, go back to the source and read the comic about them. But because of that, they've gotten just everywhere on the internet, and it's just free advertising, and that's only a good thing, I think.
Yeah, that's honestly, I completely agree. I think that's how I discovered it too, was like maybe it was like a Star Citizen guild or whatever, and someone had like these weird creatures, and I was like, well, what's up with that? Um, yeah, no, it's funny. A lot of people almost have this, Nintendo Disney mindset of, I own
Hmm.
this, and if you dare to steal my thing, my wrath will be, boundless. Versus like,
Yeah.
being a little more chill about it, and honestly, getting a lot more attention through that kind of ability to go with the flow of, people might not depict your thing in the perfect way, and they might take your baby and do something terrible with it, but, you know, on the other hand,
Yeah, yeah.
it is free marketing.
It is, and I do think, especially for a type of media that is entirely based on the internet, that it's it just not as only essentially impossible to limit things like that because you're never going to catch everything, but also, the internet really works through free sharing and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, why not take advantage of that? Like, let it go free and see what happens. And as opposed to the example that always comes to mind is that Disney sued some parents for putting Spider-Man on the grave of their son who liked him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and we're like, so there's so many like Metroid fan projects that, it wouldn't have cost Nintendo anything because these people aren't going to be like, I'm going to, if I buy this Metroid 2 remake with SNES graphics by a group that isn't charging any money for it, then I'm definitely not going to buy the new, Metroid Dread. Like there's no, all it would do is just stoke the fire of their love of the brand and the characters even more. So it's only good for them. But again, it's like very back before the internet, when it's just a very old world kind of mentality when it comes to brand. What do I want to say? Control, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a shame, but it is what it is. I think, you know, a lot of brands are kind of realizing the power of like having a fan base that genuinely loves the thing you make and will
Mm-hmm.
make
Mm-hmm.
fan art of it and spread it as far as they possibly can. Uh, and then those people get hired. It's always nice to see, the higher fans
Yeah, yeah.
mentality. Well, awesome. Um, yeah, I guess at this point, we can kind of chat about, maybe wrap up talking about like any plans you have for the future, projects you're working on, or just kind of your ongoing stuff is as far as it may go. Um, yeah, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we should know about?
Well, yeah, there's one thing that I see this come up a lot because, well, this is something that I myself feel very strongly about as well. That if I start a webcomic, I'm like half expecting it to never finish.
Hmm.
I wish it wasn't the case because, yeah, I love getting invested into a story, character's world, but also I know just by the numbers, far more webcomics just go on infinite hiatus or wrap up quickly so that the person can move on rather than reach a proper conclusion. That yeah, I want to assure just everyone that I'm seeing this through to the end. This is exactly what I want to be doing with my life. This is exactly the story I want to be telling. And also, uh, well, so yeah, I want to promise you, yes, you will see the end of this. This is not going to be one of those things that ever fades away before it is properly told. And kind of on that note, uh, the death of Miura, the guy who made Berserk comics, really did make me think about, I'm not going to be here forever. I only started learning to draw and, drawing comics like my mid 30s.
Hmm.
So I've seen a lot of comics that, just keep meandering around, taking their time until like somebody realized, oh, wait, I'm like 89 years old. I could die anytime, or just any of the things that life can throw at us. That I wanted to make sure that the Ada Placers isn't one of those forever projects.
Hmm.
Like everything is building towards the end that I know is coming. Uh, so the Ada Placers is going to have a conclusion, and I'll probably just after that keep telling stories in that setting, probably with the original characters in the background, having finished their character
Oh,
arcs, but
that's
still
cool.
around. But yeah, rather than waiting until the very end, I wanted to make this a project that I can see the beginning to the end of. So yeah, I'm not going to prolong it or keep it going just to keep it going. I want to make sure that you know because we have no idea how much time we have on this earth,
Hmm.
that I'll be able to tell that this is a story I'll be able to tell in a reasonable amount of time before moving on to other things. So yeah, I just wanted to give my assurance that yes, I am in this for the long run. I am completely locked in. You will see the satisfying conclusion to this story.
That's really cool. Yeah, I tend to have a very journey over destination mindset. Maybe I've been traumatized by far too many stories that had amazing beginnings and middles and then the end kind of Game of Thrones season 8
I feel that.
like they kind of disappointing, like they did not know where they wanted to go and they had to wrap up in a way that was deeply unsatisfying, but that is cool to see. I think I a lot of folks probably have a lot of trust in you as a writer just from the way you've kept this very consistent tone and kind of level of quality over the years. Uh,
I hope so.
and also the art, which just keeps getting better. Honestly, that's one of my favorite things about the comic too, is seeing like the initial art when you first start, and then seeing how it just like keeps getting way better over time. Uh, yeah, that's really fun.
Yeah, and I do want to be improving in some way, just consistently. And I mean, I'm very happy with where it is right now. It's got a good balance between quality and the time it takes to make a page.
Mm.
Because I've also seen like one of the quickest ways to burn out a comic is to make each page or like every panel a work of art on its own. but also, it's kind of hard to read because you only get an update like once every other month or so, and then
Yeah.
it's over in like 5 minutes, even though you'll spend, just entire minutes poring over the beautiful details of every panel. But honestly, there are, like increases in quality that I'm looking at, but I mainly am looking at increasing my pace. Like
Hmm.
if I could just get even one extra comic posted per month, that's, just that's a lot more story I can tell a lot faster. So I always want to be improving on something, whether it's speed or, visual quality. Uh, but yeah, I mean, this partially began as a never stop drawing and get rusty again experience. So it is continuing to be that.
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you. I loved hearing your insights. I think this is probably going to be very valuable to anyone who's, looking to make their own project and maybe might be procrastinating, as we are all known to do. Uh,
I hope so.
yeah. I wish you the best of luck in your kind of comic endeavors and continuing your story. Uh, I hope to see much more of it.
Oh, you definitely will.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Val. It's been a pleasure to speak with you. Any closing thoughts or things you'd like to plug?
Well, one upside of working on just one thing is that I only really have one thing to plug. If you like the comic, that's my entire life pretty much. So yeah, but yeah, just overall, I cannot state enough, and I never will stop saying this, that if you want to draw, if you want to tell stories through comics, you can. I mean, no matter who you are, no matter how much you suck at it, because everybody sucks at the beginning. It's like nobody, okay, you grew up speaking English. Well, everybody sucks at speaking Spanish then until you practice a whole lot. Like, it never comes from nowhere. You will start sucking, and then every single one, it gets a little better. So if you want to, you can. It absolutely is just a straight up repetition. Repetition is how human brains get used to anything. And I mean, whether it's learning a martial art and getting that muscle memory down to the point that you don't even have to think about which, moves to make from this stance or that stance, to learning an instrument, when you're thinking, where do I put my hands here? Which chord do I hit here? To being able to, perform in symphonies without even, a thought crossing your mind.
Hmm.
It's all just repetition. Just drill it into your heads and you can learn anything. I wish somebody would have told me that a long time ago, but really, anybody can learn to draw. It's just, it takes a good amount of effort to keep yourself drawing regularly and, practice, but that's the same with any practice. If you're willing to do the practice, you can draw. You can make your own art, you can express yourself. So never let the inevitable awkward, beginning of it uh, because really it does feel like hitting your head against a wall
Hmm.
since you don't immediately see the results as you start practicing. But you're learning a lot. You're just learning a lot of deep brain stuff that doesn't immediately show itself on the page you're drawing on. So a ton of people give up thinking they aren't improving when they actually are, just not in ways they can see on the page yet. But yeah, that's just all I say. If you want it, you can have it. All you got to do is practice.
Absolutely. Sucking at something is the first step to being good at something.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Val. I hope you all found this helpful, and make sure to check out the comic at valsalia.com, I believe.
And that's it.
All right. And have a great day. I'll see ya.
Hey, you too. Thanks for having me.
Bye bye.